The Wednesday night series. This is session 3. Our first session was about our space, our nature, our land to be preserved, and keeping some of what's left of Old Cape Cod. 86% is developed, and much of that land that is not developed some of it is protected. And what we're finding is that even though it's protected, it's not fully protected, and people are getting around it. The towns are having a very hard time with that. They're wanting to have housing that is affordable, but much of the housing that is called affordable is not affordable to the people who want to work here and live here with their kids. So we're going to be talking about that in a second. So we're in session 3. The second session was to talk about housing affordability. And we had Rob Brennan from the Housing Assistance Corporation and Mass Housing and Climate Innovation Center talk about what is the status with that, what is the changing rules, 40Y, how that's affecting the towns, and showed us interpreted some of the maps that we saw in the first session from Andrew Gottlieb from the Association for the Preservation of Cape Cod, and talked about some of the innovative ways that houses and housing is being developed here and elsewhere. This session is going to be talking about preserving the undeveloped land, but the sustainable housing and land community. And we're talking about what's going on across the Cape. And one example of that, and Ray will be talking about what's going on in Barnstable, which is our largest town, and we'll hear some interesting things about that. So Rob Brennan was our second. Our Habitat for Humanity spoke last week, talked about what they're doing and how things are changing for them. They're in Falmouth. They're doing 4 new homes, and in a year, within the next year, they'll be starting 14 more. So we are in Massachusetts. There are more habitat homes being built than anywhere in the country. So what are the Cape Towns doing about this? How can they both preserve land and have housing affordability? Bob Leary was to speak of that, and I promise then we'll get some of that and add that to our videotape. This is being videotaped. And will be on YouTube for everyone to access if they're not here. And then Ray will talk. I just want to, let's see here. So here are some of the issues that I'd just like to put forward as we think about this. I'm sure many of you are familiar with these. Growth versus conservation and affordability. Zoning, subdivisions, funding, and town land purchases. Can the town purchase lands and preserve them? What are they able to do? What not? Year-round versus short-term rentals, obviously a big issue, especially since the Cape is such a visited place. And as you probably know, most of the people working in our hospitals are travelers, and because they can't afford to live here year-round. Many of our teachers, many of our people who work in our restaurants and our hotels, again, can't afford to live here and have to come across the bridges. And many other, the municipal workers, our police, our firefighters, teachers, healthcare, municipal tourism, scientific workers. Big issue. If you try to buy a house in Woods Hole, it's just about unaffordable. It is unaffordable unless you make over $200,000 a year, easily. And then what are the future risks and benefits if this continue? And what are the opportunities if we can make a change and shift things? So I'm going to stop here. And what we're going to do is just to ask Ray to speak and share with us what's going on in Barnstable and anything else he knows about any other towns. And the opportunities and challenges that he's facing, where they've had successes, where he hopes things will go, and where things might go in the future. And then we'll open it up for questions. If you would put those along the way into the chat, that would be great. And Jenny is going to be tracking those. So please ask any questions that come to mind during the time so we can look at them as we're going. All right, Ray, you ready to start? If you would unmute yourself.
Ready to go.
Thank you, Ray.
All right, thanks for having me. So off the top, I retired after 37 years working for the federal government in Washington, and I got a very nice note from Lou, and he said you know, the members of the panel will have about 15 minutes to speak. In my experience in DC, the only person in DC who got to speak for 15 minutes was the president. And nobody else, anybody else that presumed to speak that long would be looking for a new job the next day. So I propose to give you my best 5 minutes, and then I'm open to listening and answering any questions. That said, there's a couple of things that are sort of housekeeping observations. Um, Barnstable's a little different from many of the other towns on the Cape in that it has a town council form of government, and that means that the members, for example, of the planning board, and actually all the volunteer commissions and boards, are appointed by the council versus being elected. And what that means in effect is that the folks that are elected, they have a little bit more leeway. They are elected because of stances that they take on certain issues, and they have more leverage to be able to act on their own. The the various boards and commissions in Barnstable being appointed serve at the pleasure of the council. So it's an important distinction because we make recommendations, but we don't make policy, and that's just important to keep in mind as we go along. So in Barnstable, we basically have three levels of attack for how to deal with various important policy issues: the strategic, the operational, and the tactical. What that means is that at the strategic level, we have the local comprehensive plan that lays out essentially in a 5 to 10 year time horizon, where do we want to be? What does it look like in very broad terms? Affordable housing, sustainable economic development, delivery of public services, and uh, hopefully more and better green space. So that's at the above the wave tops level. Then there's the operational level. Essentially, from the comprehensive plan, the then have, for example, the housing production plan and the Barnstable open space and recreation plan. These focus on specific areas and talk about from a at a how would I say I don't like to say operational, but how do we then accomplish the goals that are set forth in the strategic plan? And typically, then the various departments in the town would participate in drafting these things up. And then on the tactical level, that's when the planning board, the conservation commission, the community preservation commission, they engage on the project level. So the Barnstable Planning Board negotiates with developers on specific projects on things like uh, okay, you want to create a luxury condominium development, and you by law you have to have at least 10% affordable units. We actually want 25%, and we go back and forth and back and forth and see where we come out from there. And then from the Conservation Commission also takes a look at from the environmental impact, and the Community Preservation Commission. They look at uh, how various things again across the board, like, and then we'll talk a little bit more about this. They're instrumental in the acquisition of new open spaces. So the that's a little different from other towns, but that's how Barnstable comes at the overall problem. Now, I just have to share, Lou, you were just so right in your opening comments. Um, Last Tuesday, I had to bring someone to TF Green Airport in Providence to catch a 7:15 a.m. plane. We made it. We made it to TF Green in an hour and 3 minutes. It took me 3 hours to get back because I
Mm.
spent about 2.5 hours with hundreds and thousands of my best friends sitting in bumper to bumper traffic. It's too bad we don't have the Bourne representative because I got to know the lovely town of Bourne intimately as we snaked through all the community streets, um, guided by Waze and Google and whatever. And because there were apparently the state DOT didn't really come up with they had a planning fail. There was nothing out there trying to direct us. So I would say a good chunk of the folks that were sitting in traffic with me were doing exactly what you said. They're going to work. They had business on the Cape, whatever it was. They didn't get there when they were probably supposed to. And your mention about Woods Hole, I have a friend that works at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, and the delays were so great now that they work from home as best they can, and it's a disruption to operations at Woods Hole. So these are real world implications of not being able to afford a place to live on the Cape, and they are things that underline, foot stomp what the Barnstable Planning Board is trying to do in terms of uh, ringing from the developer, sometimes willingly, maybe sometimes not so willingly, to try to maximize the affordable units by deed that are created. So we have some success stories. Since 2023, 780 housing units have been permitted or are in the permitting process to be built in downtown Hyannis. And of those units, about 17%, 131, are considered affordable. Another thing that's I think is really important to consider is that in Barnstable, the overwhelming focus is to develop, if you will, already developed sites in the essentially it's downtown Hyannis. The growth incentive zone is the official zoning name, but they are sites that are developed, many times neglected or underutilized, sometimes even vacant, as opposed to uh, developing undeveloped land. And that's I think an important for at least for Barnstable. That's a really important consideration for us and for all the other committees that work on these. And another, I would say, or a little bit of horn tooting. Um, Barnstable's been able to preserve over 12,000 acres thus far, which is about 30% of the total um, area of the town. And one of the ways that we find is most effective, and again, I think you talked about this, was a public-private partnership with the Barnstable Land Trust. Uh, just recently, the Katuitt Highlands Golf Course, a charming, it's about 10 acres, uh, stuck in the middle of the village of Katuitt. And because of various and sundry other things, it was going to be put up for sale. There was a great concern about what this little green gem would turn into if it was just going to turn into a housing development, what have you. The
Mm.
town worked with the land trust, and it was acquired. And so, and not only will it be a green space, but it will continue to function as a neat little 9-hole golf course for the foreseeable future. And that was all worked on a village level basis with the Barnstable Land Trust. Those are the kinds of things that we try to do, to use good sense, um, husband public money, and to take whatever steps, large or small, in preserving the charm of our island. I would say that in terms of the joint approach to this is that we balance the need for sustainable growth, and just like you said, the fact of the matter is that uh, your favorite restaurant may only be open 3 days a week because they just can't get enough help to stay open more than that. And again and again, and it's at all levels, whether it's the nurses at the hospital, whether it's the police or the firemen or whoever it is that provides critical services, or the folks that work at moderate to low income jobs who are forced to live across the bridges. And on last Tuesday, they were sitting there burning their $5 a gallon gas and emitting tons of fumes into the air that unnecessarily. It's for jobs that don't pay a whole lot, as opposed to my friend that works at Woods Hole. Even that is a nicely paying job, but as you said, Lou, if you're not making well into six figures, you can't afford to live in Woods Hole or Falmouth. So the balance between I don't think, at least in Barnstable, I think I can say with confidence that there's not a tension between green space versus affordable housing. It's more, can we effectively harness development in the downtown Hyannis area, which has the infrastructure to support greater density housing, or just mixed use development, as opposed to going out in the woods and chopping trees down. That doesn't happen all that much in Barnstable right now, I'm happy to say. The other thing I would just kind of wind up with, because that's about enough for me, is that a couple of years ago, the planning board worked very hard with the professional staff to develop what's called form-based house zoning. What that means is that if a developer comes in and their project meets the guidelines laid out, they can move forward by right, and don't have to go through a whole bunch of bureaucratic hoops, whether they are meetings or hearings. They don't have to retain attorneys or engineers or professional staff. They submit their project to the town staff. They review it to see if it meets the specifications of the form-based zoning, and if it does, there they go. They're good to go. So we've tried to make development as painless as possible for those, because no development is just as great an evil as bad development. And we are moving forward with that in Barnstable, and concentrating it in downtown Hyannis. So I think I'll leave you with that, and I welcome any questions you have.
Thank you. Fortunately, Bob Leary is here, so you're not going to be the only one speaking.
Okay.
And second of all, if it's okay, I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions to get a little more detail, if that's okay. The first one is, what is the role the planning board is having in this balancing act? What power do you have? What's working, isn't working for you?
Uh, the planning board, I have to give a little group slap on the back. The planning board is a really cohesive, civil, and respectful organization. We may not always agree, but we value each other's opinions, and we bring to the table a lot of different expertise. At the end of the day, we take into consideration uh, what has been proposed, whether it's a project, whether it's perhaps a proposed difference in um, a tweak to the to zoning or something like that. Uh, at the bottom line is that the planning board makes a recommendation to the town council. Town council is going to approve it, disapprove it, tweak it. They set policy, they set guidelines, they adopt the comprehensive plan and the charters for the other committees and boards that are charged with then interpreting that vision within the guidelines set forth by the town council.
Thank you. And the second question is, when it comes to things, barriers being removed, zoning, bylaw, anything that in the past anyway has gotten in the way of being able to do what you think the town needs to do for the long-term plan, what's changed in the last few years?
Uh, as I mentioned, the form-based zoning, what it did was instead of sort of taking a lot of zoning ordinances kind of take the approach of um, I'll know it when I see it. I know if it's good, I'll know it. What this did was say in very minute detail, building facades, acceptable building facades, acceptable finish for buildings, building setback, the how far forward or a second story can be. All that is laid out in detail so that a developer hands this to their engineer and says, okay, if we meet these guidelines, then we don't have to ask for any waivers. We don't have to have hearings to see if this will be approved. If it meets these guidelines, it is approved, and have at it.
Super. And when it comes to things like plot size for buildable and ADUs, cluster housing, has any of that, or is any of that in the currently evolving or changing?
Yes, yes. Uh, it's funny you should say that because uh, in my last, I guess it was, I was going to say confirmation hearing, when my last interview with the council's appointments committee, I talked about that. Currently, the uh, single family residential areas are zoned for 2 acres, and I'm saying, okay, so then that means that a developer comes in, has puts a building on that 2 acre lot that's probably going to have five bedrooms or and 4 baths or a big house. And I said, well, why not make two or maybe even four smaller house, 3 bedroom, 2 bath. Right now, again, we're in the midst of executing a townwide sewering plan. However, the time horizon for that, I live in Katuitt, and Katuitt isn't going to see sewers for 30 years. But there, that doesn't mean that you can't set up the advanced, innovative septic systems and put 2 houses on the lot or 4 houses on the lot and connect them to an advanced system. So those are the technical details are a lot easier to deal with than the political details, because as you know, and this what I these opinions usually start with, my family's been on the Cape for 5 generations and we never did things this way. And I say, well, then actually, but then I know that you're some of the ones that are responsible for the mess we're in now because you didn't do anything for 5 generations except throw trash in the dump. And so we're it's an interesting cultural, political challenge, and it is interesting to see the folks that come to our hearings what they have to say. Some literally say, we need to bring Hyannis back to the way it was in the 1950s, quote unquote. And I have to say that I'm not sure, but I don't think that it was as charming then as it is now, or vice versa. And quite frankly, I think that looking backwards is always more nostalgic than looking forward.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Bob to start speaking, and then we'll pull you both back after we ask questions of Bob and see what questions are from our people who are here. And so we will unpin you now, and we will pin Bob Leary.
Hello. Let me,
You are.
yep. Hi.
Hi, welcome. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Uh, well, let me kind of run up to speed with what's been going on with Falmouth. Right now, we're dealing with the Seasonal Communities Act. We've just started talking about that. We plan on having some hearings. There's a lot to unpack with that. You have the tiny homes. You have tiny homes with wheels. You have undersized lots. So there's a lot to unpack with that. But what I have to say about Falmouth is we've been pretty proactive over I've been on the planning board for 17 years, and I feel we've been pretty proactive. We instituted the accessory apartment bylaw several years ago. That's been very successful. For a while, we were seeing two or three per meeting. Every 2 weeks, we'd see two or three come in. It also brought some illegal garage apartments into compliance. We have a business redevelopment zone, which is concentrated down along Main Street and East Main Street and T-Ticket. We just passed what we call Mr. Cod. It's a multifamily district. And again, we're trying to create housing in our village centers and try and keep it from expanding outward. So there's a lot going on with that. We still have a lot of work to do. There are some answers that I would like. One of the things that never gets asked about is why is property so expensive? What is contributing to that? And I see what's happening is the influx of wealth, where you have people coming in, they can afford to tear down a house, build a house that is way much bigger and more expensive, thus raises the property values all around it. And it contributes to making things more unaffordable. And I think you can't just stop someone from buying a piece of property and doing that. But I think through some zoning restrictions, whether it's restricting the size of the new home, whether it's increasing setbacks, or whether it's tax for tearing down an existing structure. But we need to do something to kind of curb the expansion of expensive homes. There's no way that we can keep up with this. And even with 40B, when you're building 3 to 1, the math never works. You're not going to outpace the market rate homes with 40B. It just doesn't work. Lou is muted.
Bob, you familiar with 40Y?
40Y?
Yes.
Yeah, not a whole lot, but it hasn't been a main topic at our meetings.
Okay, it's something that seems to be coming up. It was passed a few years ago, and now the details are in place for the towns to start following it. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah.
So,
And the other thing that comes into play is we are a sole source aquifer. We are an island. And at our joint meeting with the select board a couple months ago, I asked the question, are we prepared if we have a 10-year drought? And there was no answer to that. So, what if we do? And, when I first joined the planning board, I looked at balancing development with housing and the quality of life. And it's getting more and more difficult. And as far as affordable housing goes, I've been a Habitat for Humanity construction supervisor for 33 years now. And I'm starting a four-house project here in Falmouth in July. And you were talking about the IA systems, and that's what we're going to have. We're going to have four houses on a single IA system.
Wonderful. Could
So
you describe what
we
an
need to
IA
do more of
system is?
that because, like Katuitt, we're not going to see Falmouth sewer for years. The
What,
entire town. They're
could you
working
just
on it now.
describe, could you describe for people what an IA system is, please?
I'm not an engineer. It's I really can't explain what it is, but it's an
Is it shared
integrated
is it shared
septic
septic?
system.
Is it a shared septic?
Yes, it's a shared septic.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
And does it do
It's not Title V, in other words.
right?
Yeah.
Does it treat nitrogen or not?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, it reduces it.
that's great.
I forget what the parts per million is with the ones that we're installing, but it's a lot lower than what the state is currently requiring.
Wonderful.
So
So I
I was
assume after,
I was just going to help my fellow colleague. The IA systems, for example, they use charcoal. They use other alternative things than just being chunks of concrete with smaller things in them. The testing and everything is being done at Joint Base. I was going to say Joint Base Otis.
well,
um,
one of the drags on installing them is the maintenance and the fact that they do require electricity to operate, and
that's
then it's
right.
about $1,200 a year to maintain them. And what
Yes.
we've found in Falmouth is where we've had to require them, people don't maintain them; they actually just turn them off.
Mhm.
So.
So after all your many years on the planning board, where are you finding your optimism right now?
I think it's in Mr. Cod and the business redevelopment, where, like I said, we're trying to concentrate development in the downtown area. We have a plaza, the Falmouth Plaza, that we had, I believe it was Horton Worsley that did a whole study for us. And that has kind of gone by the wayside because that plaza is owned by three different owners. So we're still pushing for that. We just had a bank that went in there that kind of messed things up for us, but we're still talking about that, and it's not off the table. And I think with the Seasonal Communities Act, that's going to also kind of push some of these initiatives forward for us. So we do have some hope for that. And I heard I think it was you or Ray talking about utilizing existing properties, businesses and things like that. We have an old nursing home on Main Street that Mike Galasso, I'm not sure if people are familiar with him, but he's been an affordable housing developer for years. And we had something all ready to go, and it was going to be workforce housing. It was going to be mainly rooms for rent, small units. And somehow it's just come up against some roadblock, and it went through the planning board. We thought it was a great idea, and we don't know what's happened to it since. But in the paper last week, it said that the funding was being withdrawn from it, so we don't know where that stands. But we looked at that as a great use of that facility downtown, right on Main Street, hooked up to the sewer, close to amenities, public transportation. It checked all the boxes. Our EDIC is also looking to develop a parcel by the Falmouth Depot. So that's in the works now too. So again, we're trying to concentrate everything close to transportation, amenities, and downtown in the villages.
I know that Ray was talking about some changes in their zoning. What kind of changes are going on in Falmouth?
We're looking at the changes from the seasonal community, those zoning bylaws that we're going to have to change. That's our next agenda item for us as far as any zoning changes.
Anything having to do with allowing more homes on smaller pieces of land?
Yeah, that's part of that conversation. And that's been part of the Mr. Cod and the business redevelopment. When we talk about 20 units per acre, people kind of freak out over that. And yet, when you point out something, it doesn't mean that an acre is going to have actual 20 units on it, but you could have a small parcel. We redeveloped the old Oddfellows Hall right in Town Hall Square, and there were 4 units in that,
Yes.
and that equated to 20 units per acre when you looked at it that way. So a lot of it is getting people to understand what it is and what they're actually thinking about, and how to change that mindset that, okay, it isn't always what you think it is. It isn't like you're putting 20 houses on an acre.
Yes. Now, I know Falmouth is different than Barnstable when it comes to the hierarchy. When it
Mhm.
comes to the planning board, what permissions do you need to get? How much is it? You just make decisions based on what it's handed down to you. What kind of barriers are you facing and how are you overcoming them?
Well, we have a town manager and a select board, and when it comes to changes to zoning and things like that, we can initiate all that.
Hmm.
And so it runs through town meeting. If we want to create some zoning bylaws and changes, and we've been going through a lot of housekeeping stuff lately, it goes to town meeting. Some things do get bounced off the select board, and then other decisions that we make go forward to the ZBA.
Hmm. And what kind of successes are you finding?
Uh, we've been getting along pretty well, I'd say. What I've found with our ZBA is, especially when it comes to nonprofit, non-housing entities, they tend to be a lot stricter with us. And for an example, we just finished up a 10 house subdevelopment in East Falmouth a year or two ago, and we had 5 acres, and they cut us down to 10 houses on those 5 acres, when a private developer could have gone in there and put 32 units on that property. And it's inexplicable to me why they are doing that to us when we're completely 100% affordable. We're not a 3-to-1 ratio like regular commercial 40Bs. So trying to overcome that, and the mindset that I found on some board members that they look at it as like Section 8 housing. And you got to try and change that mindset as well.
Yeah. How much, I know that it's been an issue in the past. I don't know today what's going on. When it comes to not in my backyard, the NIMBYism,
Oh
is
yeah.
that getting in the way still?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We have a 14 house subdevelopment going on 7 acres in North Falmouth. And that's been the biggest time suck for our lawyers, has been all of the hearings and the neighbors, and trying to appease them, uh, to the point where one of the abutters wants us to drill a test well because he's still on his well. And even though the septic system is going to be state of the art and it's nowhere near his well, he wants us to do that. So he's asking the ZBA to condition it that way. They wanted us to extend the town water past our property and feed the rest of the neighborhood. I mean, they tend to ask for things that no private developer would agree to,
Hmm.
and yet they feel that it's okay to ask us. So, but there has been a lot of pushback from that development in particular. The one in Falmouth, which is behind the Restore, it's right by the high school. There's been no pushback for that because it's kind of tucked out of the way, and nobody sees it, and it's not in somebody's backyard. So
Does the town do much conservation partnerships?
uh
Like
I don't, the only conservation partnership I would say would be if we're okaying a private subdivision,
yeah.
and it comes down to whether you do cluster zoning or cluster developments. And we really push the cluster developments. And we just passed one where there is a parcel of land, and it's being debated now whether they're going to turn that over to the town or the 300 committee because it is contingent with another piece of town land. So we do push a lot of that to conserve as much open space as we can and put houses tighter together.
Could you just, is cluster development just what it sounds like, that you're putting more houses together in a smaller area?
Yes, yeah. So if you have a 5 acre parcel, you might cluster 5 or 6 houses on 2 of those acres.
Hmm.
And it'd be like a cul-de-sac with houses closer together, smaller lots. That's what the cluster would be.
Obviously, one of the biggest issues in Falmouth is that, what is it, about 55% of the houses are second and third homes in Falmouth.
Yeah.
Um, is there any solution to dealing with that? Are there any incentives for getting those people to rent for a year? What do you think are the solutions?
They've been proposing a tax incentive for people to do that, to open up their homes for year-round rentals.
Hmm.
And I, I'm not sure where that sits right now, but that's been one of the proposals. And I think we need to incentivize people in order to rent their properties. I mean, I don't know how long some of you guys have been on the Cape, but back in the day, you always had your winter rentals. And those of us that were here year round, that's what you do. You'd move into some place for the winter, pretty low rent. And then you'd find someplace in the summer. When you were younger, you would shack up with a bunch of guys or something in a cottage. But that doesn't exist anymore. And I think COVID had a lot to do with that. You had a lot of people that who had second homes here that moved down here, and they've stayed and they're permanently addressed here. So I think one of the other things that we need to do in Massachusetts, especially, is I know a lot of people who refuse to rent because they're afraid of that. As a landlord in the state, you really don't have any rights. If somebody decides not to pay the rent, or they break the lease and they just stop, it takes forever to get someone out and they become a squatter. And in Massachusetts, a squatter is a civil offense. It's not a criminal offense. And you end up in a situation where you have to pay somebody to get out. And I think the state needs to do something about that to give landlords a little more teeth in order to uh, uh, get rid of bad tenants. I mean, we always hear about the landlord from hell, but nobody ever hears about the tenant from hell. And I got a boatload of stories about tenants from hell. So we need to do something to help landlords and give them some incentives to rent to people.
Ray was talking about the fact that in Barnstable, about 30% is undeveloped land. Do you know
Mhm.
what the numbers are for Falmouth?
I don't know what the percentage is, but we've got like 3,000 acres of undeveloped land. And what's been happening, like the North Falmouth development, that was 50 acres of mostly undevelopable land. It's mostly swamp, but they carved off 7 acres for this housing project. And I can see us doing that with other things. We do have another parcel down in Woods Hole, Webster Woods, and that was purchased for public use. And there was a big controversy about putting housing down there, and it kind of got defeated, but that might be on the table again. Uh, the other thing with Woods Hole, we have the institutes down there. And I don't know if you've ever been to the MBL housing campus, but it's all these little tiny cottages on all this land. And I talk about having a partnership between the town, the state, and the institutes to create more housing on their property. They have the property. I mean, Woods Hole is owned mostly by the institutes, and they have the property to do this with. And I would like to see more cooperation between the town and the state and those institutes.
Interesting. Any other dreams that you have of things that could change to make this work?
Uh, I think I heard talk about 2 acre zoning, and we have sections like that. And when we were looking at the accessory apartment bylaw, we decided that we came up with a 40% of the existing floor space for an ADU because we did not want to say 50% because then people thought of duplexes. And that we would have never gotten through town meeting if that's what the thinking was. But I really think that what we should be doing with those is letting someone subdivide those big, large acreage properties and maybe put 3 or 4 houses on them.
Yes.
It's such a waste of land that and the infrastructure is pretty much there. You're not putting in roads, you're not cutting down more trees. You just have to enhance the septic system that would service all the units that are on there. And that's one of the things with the tiny homes. We're looking at how that's going to affect things. Can you have more than one tiny home on a lot? Are you going to have little cottage communities on a single lot? So there's a lot of that I think is going to get discussed and batted around.
Super. Now, from your experience with Habitat, what do you think is going on in other towns that Falmouth could do?
Phew. Well, the Cape has been really good for habitat. A lot of towns have given us land that's been tax-taking land. Uh, they've been very cooperative with waiving fees for building departments and things like that. So we've got a very good reputation throughout the Cape, and they help the towns help us out as much as they can. And the only thing, like I mentioned before, is sometimes you get stuck in bureaucratic stuff with different boards, and then it's the neighbors. We just finished building, I think it was 4 houses in Wellfleet,
Mhm.
and there was a piece of property that the neighbors held up for 15 years. And we had a lawyer who volunteers with us, and he spent 15 years trying to free up that piece of property that was given to us.
And eventually it was freed up. And in fact, there are
Yep.
many of those neighbors who then helped on building the houses.
Yeah, sometimes they do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's people don't really understand what it is.
Do you see any demographic shifts as a result of what's going on with housing affordability?
Oh yeah. We're getting older. I don't have to tell anybody here that. Uh, I volunteer with the Woods Hole Museum Boat Shop on Saturdays, and it was started by a bunch of us old guys, and now it's been moved on to a bunch of younger people, and they're all saying the same thing that they can't afford to live here. There's a young couple there, and they're going to give it 5 years, and if they can't find something that they can afford to live in, uh, they're going to have to move off Cape. And they're people, they're both boat builders. They work for a couple of the boat yards in around Falmouth. And I hear it from kids just getting out of college. It's the same thing. People talking about having to move into the basement, or the parents putting an ADU behind the house for them. So it is a real concern with the younger people, and I'm afraid we're going to start losing a lot more of them.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Um,
No, you're
um,
welcome.
Steve, I think if you could unmute yourself, you had a question about philosophy. Is Steve there? Nope. Okay.
Not
Ray,
at
do
the
you have
moment.
any? Joanne, is Steve there?
Not at the moment. He'll be right
Okay.
back.
All right, thanks. Ray, do you have any questions of Bob? If you could unmute.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I heard a lot of very familiar things that you were talking about, Bob. Uh, so we have the multi-generational family home, um, and the challenges from that. What is an appropriate use right now? Barnstable's in the process of reviewing the use of a home for business, separately about parking. Um, Literally across the street from me this Saturday, there's two generations of a family living in a house, and it was a great occasion. Somebody graduated from high school, and there were at least 25 vehicles parked all over the front yard and in the street, and um, to capacity, and to the point where on the little narrow road that we live on, vehicles couldn't pass each other going in opposite directions. And so you, on the one hand, if it's once a year, okay. When it then becomes on a routine basis, there's vehicles all parked all around, or there's a problem with safety. Those are the kind of things that people get upset about. And when you have a business and you have workers that come, and you have work vehicles and they have their own private vehicles, and how do you handle that? There's we had some hearings on adjusting the zoning ordinances for that, and unfortunately there was some misunderstandings. I'm sure you appreciate this, Bob. The word went out that this was a uh, what was it called? Interim subcommittee of the town council. It was not the planning board who came up with these things, but the word went out that the planning board was going to ban parking boat trailers in your yard. And holy mackerel, they came out with pitchforks and torches, and I was forced to say, like, time out. We didn't come up with this. They did. These guys over there that were appointed by the council. And so you have folks that say, nobody's going to tell me what I'm going to do on my property.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, well, actually, if you volunteer to take spent nuclear fuel from the Pilgrim reactor, yeah, you can't let them dump it in your backyard. Mm-hmm. And we'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Things like that. So you have, again, I was talking about this previously. And you've been around a lot longer than me, at least permanently. I when I wore a younger man's clothes back in the 70s, I used to hitchhike from the University of Connecticut to Hyannis. But I know the well, it's a bunch of guys and girls in that little cottage. It was fun.
Yeah.
At any rate, there is that tension. There's the NIMBY. There's the nobody's going to tell me what to do with my property, and yet at the same time bemoaning how things are changing, and what are we going to do about this or that when it comes to somebody has a business, they mow people's lawns, and the business and the guys that mow the lawns come to their house and park their vehicles there, and then drive. There are work trucks that are parked in the guy's lawn. How do you handle that? And I'm sure you've got your own stories about that.
Well, parking is a big issue with us. We keep talking about how we require too much parking, especially for businesses and restaurants. And we've been doing things with shared parking. If a business is within a certain distance from another business, that was part of the deal with the remake of the nursing home on Main Street. But what we found when we were going through our ADU bylaw is that there's no law against parking on the street in Falmouth, no matter how wide it is. But we required people to be able to park on the property. And where you run into problems with that is when you start to talk about lot coverage, when you're talking about structures and pavement and all that kind of stuff. And whether we need to look at changing the lot coverage ratios or percentages to allow more parking on the property. And then you have parking in front yards. And so there's all kinds of issues when it comes to parking. And that's one of the other things that is on our agenda is we need to update our parking bylaws. Because right now we even have a bus company that wants to park buses uh, on 28A in North Falmouth, and it's a totally inappropriate place because it backs right up to a neighborhood and right across the street from another neighborhood. But yet the building commissioner decided that yeah, it was an okay use for that. So we need to really clarify our parking regulations. And speaking of that, we have had a group that have looked into the Airbnb situation, the short-term rentals, and they've come up with something that is coming down the pike. And that was one of the issues with that is parking, because I know on the street I live on, there are two Airbnbs, and at certain times there could be 8 cars parked on the lawn and 3 along the street, so it gets a little crazy. Um, so I think with when we're starting to talk about tiny homes, that's going to be one of the issues is you're going to have to provide parking, off-street parking, because it is a safety concern. And that's one of our concerns. I know every planning board is concerned with safety and fire safety and police and all that and access to properties. And when you have people parked on, and sometimes both sides of the street, you have people parked on one side, and then you, like you said, you have a landscaper that's working on a house next door. They're parked across. It cuts it down to, a 10-foot lane to pass through. So there really needs to be some regulation for that. But that said, it comes down to enforcement. Who enforces this? We've had enforcement
Absolutely.
officers.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes, it's. I mean, we did have an enforcement officer for the ZBA, but no one knows who that is, or even if we have that, and it's all complaint driven. So if somebody doesn't complain, nothing really happens. And then if they do complain, and they come back and say, "Well, there's no law that says I can't park on the street," so it's a conundrum. But we're talking about it anyways, and we're making people aware of it.
We have a question asking about the definition of affordable housing. I know in Massachusetts, the definition generally is housing that costs the occupants no more than 30% of their gross household income. And
Yeah.
most programs target families earning at or below 80% of the area median income. And I
Yeah.
think the area median income is between 80 and 100,000.
Yeah.
Was that right?
I think so, yeah. And we're even looking at not through Habitat. We go as high as 80%, but we service mostly 60% AMI. But there are some housing developers that are looking at 100 to 110% of AMI. So
Same
it's
with Barnstable.
yeah, and one of the
Mostly
reasons
60.
what was that? I didn't hear.
I said in Barnstable, yeah, we go with usually it's 60,
Yeah,
60%.
yeah,
So just to define that, if the median income on the Cape is somewhere around, what is it, 120,000, 100,000?
hmm
Let's say it's 100,000. So if it's you can't spend more than 30% of your income, that's $30,000 a year,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
$30,000 a year is way, way, way below what it would cost to own the average house in Falmouth anyway,
hmm
right?
I believe so.
The average house, I believe, in Falmouth is around 900,000.
Yeah,
So 900,000 a mortgage at 6%, just you work it out. No one can afford it
no.
unless they're earning somewhere between 150, 200,000 for their household income.
And what we've found too is by keeping the AMI what it kind of restricts couples from getting a house, especially a habitat house, where you have a couple and they're making a little bit more, but they've got 2 or 3 kids, and they can't afford to buy their own house at market rate, but yet they make too much to afford or too much to qualify for a habitat or another affordable entity's home.
Sure. Steve, are you there? Did you have a question about philosophy, Steve?
You mean last week?
No, this week.
No.
Okay, never mind. Let's see. We have a question. Do long-range plans take into account consideration of how the growth affects our roads and increase traffic on them? Will more roads be built? Do either of you have plans for if you're going to have more people living here during the year round, what that would take when it comes to roads and other things related to that? Go ahead, Bob.
Uh, we leave that up to the DPW and the select board and the town manager.
Okay.
We don't really deal with infrastructure per se, unless it's in a development that we're dealing with. But it's something that I bring up transportation every time we talk about affordable housing and trying to make it so that people can have access to better transportation. I mean, it's pretty good, but it's not as good as what I grew up with. And we, I don't know, I kind of lost my train of thought, but
Don't worry about it.
when it comes to infrastructure, that's out of our purview. So
You bet. Ray, anything on taking into account if more people have more housing? What about the roads?
So Barnstable just finished. It's called the Great Streets Program, and this is they completed the study and now in the planning phase, and basically, again, focusing on downtown Hyannis. So right now, Main Street Hyannis is one way, and there are a number of tweaks that for example, making it two ways, perhaps adding, I believe that's an additional rotary, more stop signs and less lights, and then also, Bob, help me with the cool planning term for it's multi-purpose
complete
pedestrian.
streets.
Basically, it's like wider sidewalks that people can both walk and bike
Yeah.
on and things like that.
Yeah. Falmouth has looked into complete streets where you're providing for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists. And with older roads, that's really tough to accommodate, but it's something that we talk about all the time when it comes to new developments and sidewalks and things like that. Falmouth is in the process now of redoing some of East Main Street because we just put in a new senior center a couple of years ago, and then not an assisted living, but an elderly housing project right on the corner of Scranton Ave and Main Street. I forget how many units are in there. It might be 80 units or something like that. So there's a lot of traffic being generated there. So we're working on that. The project along T-Ticket Highway has kind of languished. I don't know what happened with that. There was a lot of talk and meetings with different committees about widening that road. And I think it got such pushback from the residents there that I don't know whether the state just gave up on it.
Okay. I know that the state, I was just an article in the Cape Cod Times, the state is coming up with guidelines for electric bikes and assisted bikes and other electric vehicles besides cars based on the how fast they can go.
Yeah.
And we have in Falmouth, we have the Shining Sea Bikeway, and they've developed more places to go across Palmer to go into the park and downtown. And so, are there any new plans for having downtown available for bikes to be going safely? That you're aware
Not that I'm aware of as far as bikes. We basically all we really do is whenever we have somebody coming before us that's doing something new, we make them put bike racks in. That's about the extent. But we try and work with the bike committee, and we're trying to get people to utilize Catherine Bates as opposed to Main Street.
Right.
Because it's a wider road and not as heavily used, and there are sidewalks on both sides. So yeah, that's all I can say about that.
Thank you.
You know,
We have
Lou,
another question. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Lou, that this whole technology outstripping policy. We've been talking about this, the various e-bikes, and just like in Falmouth, Hyannis and Barnstable have a lot of vacation communities. You have a lot of folks come for the summer, come for a couple weeks in the summer, rent an e-bike, never ridden in one before. I was really happy to see that article that the state's actually considering various categories of e-bikes. But you can see a vacationer, let's just put it that way, going 30 miles an hour in a bike lane, perhaps with a helmet, perhaps without, and perhaps with a few beers under their belt, and people are getting hurt. And we right now are trying to figure out exactly what do you do about that. And Bob's got his beautiful walkway, and I'd hate to be walking along and somebody comes flying up behind me on one of those e-bikes.
It is an issue.
It is an issue, but then you have to pay for people for officers to be available to keep people from going fast and make sure they have their helmets. So it's it's a matter of balance, and it's also a matter of giving up a little freedom to have safety. So it's a challenging thing. We have another question, or David Dow asked, basically about the use of fertilizers and insecticides. It's used a lot of town water and pollute the groundwater. Is that sustainable housing? What's being done in each of your towns about that? Do you want to start, Ray? Anything?
Well, there are guidelines. For example, I live right across Shoestring Bay from Willow Bend Country Club, with its golf course, and that's actually in Mashpee. And they have guidelines for both the amounts and the types of materials that can be used for the upkeep of the golf course, for example. We have a much higher awareness of the impact of nitrogen and phosphorus in the water supply. And as far as I know, I don't think there's any hard and fast limits on the chemicals that you can put on your lawn. However, there in Barnstable now, there are, and I should say, in Barnstable, in some of the villages, because remember that you have the town, and then you have the village, and frequently left over from the last 200 years is the fire district, which also owns the water district. And so that's the lowest form of government with taxing authority. And they're very independent and very separate from the town government. So you've got different, shall we say, sometimes competing forms of government in terms of setting guidelines for the use of chemicals and pesticides and the use of water. Right now, the Catuit Water Department has put out a warning that we're in a drought condition, and watering of lawns is, if not prohibited, frowned upon. And I drive around and I can see the signs in Falmouth too, when sometimes the reservoir is getting low.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially since we're a single source, it's really dangerous and scary, especially when it comes to PFAS and what's going on in Washington. But Bob, are you going to say something?
Yeah, the whole state is shy of water. I got a friend that lives out by Quabbin, and he says they're down like 9 feet in Quabbin. And you think of what Quabbin supplies. But getting back to the fertilizers, this has
I'm
been.
sorry, could you just, what does 9 feet mean?
The height of the reservoir is
And
actually
how
down.
bad is 9 feet?
How bad is it?
Yeah.
It's in drought territory, moderate drought. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're in, is Barnstable in moderate drought as well?
I think it is. I can't remember the last time I saw the sign as you come into Falmouth about water restrictions, but I think we are on water restrictions. And I think I got that in my last water and sewer bill that, it's every other day for certain areas and uh, zip codes where you can water. Um, but water is one of my biggest concerns, and I'm surprised that we don't have more water restrictions because of the situation we're in. But getting back to pesticides and fertilizers, I was told years ago that 15% of the nitrogen that goes into our ponds and estuaries, and Falmouth is rich with ponds and estuaries, more so than any other part of the Cape.
Yeah.
And why we don't restrict that or curb that somehow and restrict how much lawn someone could have or how much fertilizer they use. I don't understand that. And I know with my organization, with Habitat, that we try and do as much xeriscaping and using native plants. And we don't give our homeowners a huge lawn to care for. And I think we need to start setting some of those guidelines for anybody that's building a house. And I remember, years ago, Cape Cod lawn was pine needles and sand and weeds. And now you have these people that it looks like an English manor with the lawns and everything else. And I just look at it and I think of all the chemicals that are going into the ponds and estuaries.
Yeah, I just after hearing Andrew Gottlieb give recommendations for what to do about replacing your lawn, it cost under $100 for me to go out and get the seeds for clover,
Hmm.
the micro seeds, and the grass that is native, uh,
Yeah,
and just scrape up my lawn and plant them and water it for 2 weeks, and I'm never going to need pesticides or anything
right,
else again, and it won't need watering. Um,
right,
I think a lot of people just don't make that connection. The reason for having local native plants is because they're supposed to be here and they
mm,
don't need water and they don't need pesticides. And
right. And
so,
they're very good at nitrogen fixing.
right?
You
Yeah,
know?
good point.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, if I could, we're about 10 minutes from the end. I'm just going to ask each of you to do both two things. One is what's most important about what you've talked about tonight? And two, if you had your druthers and you had some power in your town, um, what would you influence people to do differently so that in 10 years your town would be where it should be? So let me start with Ray since he started. So, Ray, what's most important and what would you influence and recommend?
Oh boy. I I think that I would agree with you. It starts with and ends with water. I mean, we have a limited amount. We're not going to get any more. We live basically on a big pile of sand that was created by the glaciers. Um, there's there's one basic source of water, and we have to figure out how that amount of water and the land that it within it resides, um, how many people can it sustain, how much traffic can sustain, how much business can it sustain, because essentially, um, up until now, I don't think that people talk about it, but I don't think they're serious about it. And I think that the NIMBYism and some of the other backward looking stuff has really put a real barrier to trying to look forward into the future to try to preserve the nature of what life on the Cape is, because it's going to get, as we've discussed, more and more people, and the great AI systems, they're great, but they still literally you're dumping your your toilet into the ground,
Hmm.
and sooner or later it percolates through the ground, and as opposed to putting in sewers in an expeditious manner and treating it so that it's particularly the nitrogen and phosphorus are taken out. Otherwise, we're literally going to end up drowning in our own waste. I think that's probably the most pressing thing, and it's the one of the issues that people talk about. But when it really comes down to doing something about it, I'm not seeing a whole lot of movement across the Cape
Yeah,
in dealing with that.
Thank you,
yeah.
Ray.
I agree it's amazing the pushback towns get from sewers. And what I've always said is Romulus and Remus, the first things they did is put an aqueduct and a sewer in Rome. Why has the Cape not done that in all these years? But getting back to what I would like to see, I I would like to see a lot more housing purchased by affordable housing entities to preserve the starter home stock in each town. And that could be a partnership between towns and other agencies to prevent people from buying these and tearing them down. I think it's real important that we preserve that housing stock and use as much existing structures as possible, whether it's older buildings that are being repurposed, anything that is built to prevent us from having to constantly build new all the time and taking away vital open space, which is important for our water supply. We do need open space for rain to percolate into the aquifer, and so I think those are and also make things better for landlords that they would be able to rent and have more available rental property that's affordable and give those landlords some incentive to do that. And like I said, you need to beef up some of the laws in the state to help that.
Super. Thank you. Does anyone else from the audience have any other questions that you'd like to ask? Just put them in the chat. We'll take a minute to hear about that. Jenny, if I could go to you, does anything come to you or that you've seen that I am not seeing that we should be asking Bob and Ray?
The only question in the chat that hasn't been addressed is a question about what the Seasonal Communities Act is. But I'm cognizant that it's 7:54, so I don't know if that's a can of worms you want to open.
No, well, let's just try it out. Bob, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, what the Seasonal Communities Act is going to allow is a lot of by right issues with tiny homes and undersized lots. That's what we're looking at in Falmouth, is how that's going to affect us that way. And again, it's trying to get a lot of the regulation out of it and the red tape and all the hearings and all that stuff away from it so that people can create housing more quickly than we have been able in the past.
Thank you. Ray, anything to add to that?
No, I think Bob did a good job of putting it in a capsule.
Okay. No other questions, Jenny? Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Then it's time to call it an eve. Thank you both so much for coming. For those who are here, we have another session next Wednesday at 6:30 to 8, and it is where Bob is going to be joining us, along with Representative Thomas Moakley and Rob Brennan, and a CEO of a large development company, a contractor, all just sort of stepping back and saying, given what we've heard from all of you, and given what we know, and given what's possible and what could be possible, where do we go from here? So please join us for that. And again, Bob and Ray, thank you so much.